there, a role there.
Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. President Donald Trump warns Iran it has 10 to 15 days to strike a deal over its nuclear program or face really bad things. Amid a major US military buildup in the Middle East, Trump says talks are progressing but insists Iran must agree to a meaningful settlement. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is released from police custody after being arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office over claims linked to Jeffrey Epstein. Detectives from Thames Valley Police question him for hours as they investigate allegations. President Trump tells the first meeting of his Board of Peace that nations have pledged $7 billion for Gaza reconstruction, conditional on Hamas disarming. Major questions remain over disarmament, Israeli troop withdrawal, humanitarian aid, and whether the board can deliver results. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says the country has moved beyond its worst difficulties as he opens a key party congress in Pyongyang. State media quotes him saying the nation now enters a stage of optimism and confidence after years of hardship. Venezuela's ruling party-led legislature approves a limited amnesty bill that rights groups say does not go far enough to free hundreds of political prisoners. Interim President Rodriguez releases some detainees while easing oil tensions with Washington. The United States pays about $160 million towards more than $4 billion it owes to the United Nations. The partial payment comes as President Trump hosts the first meeting of his Board of Peace, which some say could undermine the UN. French President Emmanuel Macron clashes with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni after a far-right activist is beaten to death in Lyon. Meloni blames left-wing extremists and calls it a wound for Europe, while Macron urges her to stay in her own lane. President Trump tells Congress he is seeking a civil nuclear pact with Saudi Arabia that does not include long-standing US non-proliferation safeguards. Both Trump and former President Joe Biden have backed efforts to help the kingdom build its first civil nuclear power plants. We start this hour in New Delhi and the ongoing AI Impact Summit is occurring at the Bharat Mandapam. Google's CEO Sundar Pichai is speaking right now. Let's cut across.
Alongside the recent trade agreement, this will lay a strong foundation for a robust US-India tech partnership for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sundar Pichai, for all those motivating and inspiring words. And ladies and gentlemen, today marks an important milestone as India formally joins Pax Silica, a forward-looking partnership aimed at strengthening secure and resilient technology ecosystems at a time when emerging technologies are reshaping.
Well, there we are. We'll, of course, continue to bring you all the updates coming out of the AI Impact Summit today. As soon as we get them, we'll bring them to you. But first, we head over to West Asia. Iran has sent a letter to UN Secretary General António Guterres warning that any US military aggression against the country would lead to a decisive retaliation. In the letter, Iran has stated that it would consider military bases, facilities and other assets of the attacking force in the region as legitimate targets. While expressing a desire to avoid war, Iran has made it clear that it would exercise its right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter if provoked. In the letter, Iran has referenced US President Donald Trump's social media post that mentioned possible US military action could involve using the bases Diego Garcia and Fairford Airfield for strikes in the event that Iran fails to reach a deal. Amid these heightened tensions, Iranian officials have repeatedly threatened to block the Strait of Hormuz in response to US threats. Experts have raised concerns that such a move could lead to fears of rising oil prices. According to the International Energy Agency, the strait accounts for a quarter of the world's seaborne oil trade and a fifth of all liquefied natural gas. Joining us to discuss this is Matthew Vadum, an American journalist and author. He joins us live from Washington, D.C. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Of course, this is an ongoing situation. Iran there highlighting certain concerns it has with the UN Charter and the threat of the United States and the potential of a strike. What more can you tell us about this? Of course, Iran has certain leverage in the region. And what do you think of Iran's response there of notifying the United Nations first?
Well, I think it's pretty clear Iran has no intention of reaching an accommodation with the United States on its uranium enrichment and nuclear weapons program. It's not going to agree to it. It views its nuclear weapons program as essential to the Islamic Republic's, the regime's survival, and it's not going to bargain it away. And I suspect that the Iranians, the presence of these, the mullahs are so fanatical. I don't think they're particularly concerned that a massive U.S. armada is parked off their shores and is ready to rain down punishment and hellfire on Iran in order to dissuade that country, which the U.S. considers to be the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. So I think that both sides are immovable at this point, and I wonder why they keep talking. I guess it's good that they keep talking, but I'm quite pessimistic about this. I don't think negotiations are going to resolve anything. I think that tensions are going to ramp up even further, and the only question is whether President Donald Trump, who is erratic and his actions are very hard to predict, whether he's actually going to take some sort of decisive military action to replace the regime in Iran. Right now, it looks like he's inclined to do that, but we don't know for sure what he's thinking because, to use that expression about, poker games, he holds his cards very close to his chest. So we don't know exactly what he's thinking.
Donald Trump knows what is going to happen. We now know that Iran is going to retaliate if it is attacked. It has ballistic missile capabilities. It has proxy forces across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Also, one of the major factors and leverage that Iran does have is the ability to disrupt the Strait of Hormuz. Knowing all these factors, why would Donald Trump strike the country at this point? Why would he give him that ultimatum of such a short period of time of 10 to 15 days, knowing the disruption it would cause in the region and possibly beyond?
Because I think the unspoken suggestion here is that the Trump administration really does want regime change in Iran, and they recognize that it's not going to be accomplished. Easily, and that there is going to have to be some sort of military action taken by the United States. They understand that Iran can retaliate, that Iran can strike out at America's #1 ally in the region, Israel, in order to hurt America's interests. But right now, it appears to be a risk that President Donald Trump is willing to take. Now, the real question is whether there will be boots on the ground, to use an American expression, whether America is actually going to send troops into Iran in order to change the regime, because that's the sort of thing that traditionally in America has been very unpopular.
Yeah.
If you want to conduct, like a video game style war where you just go in and bomb things from, and drop bombs from above, or you send in missiles or drones or whatever, I think the American public is generally fine with that kind of thing. But when American soldiers start coming home in body bags, then the American voters start to think long and hard about whether it's worthwhile.
Yes.
And it's an open question whether they would support that. I think Americans are generally supportive of what President Trump is doing, but we haven't seen any body bags yet. And when we start seeing those, public opinion, public sentiment may change.
And Matthew, Tehran is 10,000 kilometers, over 10,000 kilometers away from Washington. What public interest or American benefit would attacking Tehran equate to?
Well, Iran has always been a wild card. They are a bunch of fanatical people, the regime that is in Tehran, that is willing to risk widespread destruction in order to accomplish its objectives, in order to fulfill its destiny, according to the way that they interpret the Quran. They want to bring about significant changes on Earth, and if people get killed in the process, they're okay with that. And they do this fanaticism among the Revolutionary Guard, and which has been validly compared to Nazi Germany's SS, is significant, and it needs to be taken seriously. I think that Iran is enough of an irritant to the United States that it wishes for the problem to be dealt with finally, and it hasn't been dealt with. It wasn't dealt with under President Joe Biden or President Barack Obama, and I think President Trump wants to deal with this once and for all. I think that initially taking the current regime in Iran out would be destabilizing, but that could just be temporary, and you might have new stability that would set in after that. But it's a calculated risk, and right now they're wargaming at the Pentagon, trying to figure out what the best course of action is, that to minimize casualties to the United States and to America's allies in the region. But a lot of the countries, except for the most fanatical ones in the region, do not support Iran. They're very suspicious of it. The Saudis and so on. Not to mention Israel, obviously, but even a lot of the Arab Muslim countries are very uneasy with Iran and would like to see the regime gone.
Matthew, do stay with us once again as we turn over to our next story. We have some comments coming from the US President, where he has called the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew, a shame and very sad for the royal family. Trump had expressed sympathy for the former prince arrested at his Sandringham estate on suspicion of misconduct in public office. The arrest follows an investigation into claims that Mountbatten Windsor shared confidential information with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein while serving as the UK's trade envoy. However, no sexual offences are involved, and Mountbatten Windsor has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. Despite being released after 11 hours in custody, the investigation continues. King Charles expressed concern and stressed that the legal process must proceed and be transparent. He reaffirmed that the royal family would fully cooperate with authorities. Let's listen in to what the US president had to say about the arrest.
Expert in a way, because I've been totally exonerated. That's very nice. I can actually speak about it very nicely. I think it's a shame. I think it's very sad. I think it's so bad for the royal family. It's a very, very sad. To me, it's a very sad thing. When I see that, it's a very sad thing. To see it and to see what's going on with his brother, who's obviously coming to our country very soon, and he's a fantastic man, the king. So I think it's a very sad thing.
Matthew joins us once again. Matthew, some generic Trump speak there. However, he did mention a word, exonerated, given the release of these files and the controversy behind them. Do you believe that Donald Trump has well and truly been exonerated? And also, what do you make of the contrast between the United Kingdom and the United States when it comes to the accountability that is taken by officials that have appeared in the Epstein files, no matter if there is any evidence of guilt or not? What do you think of the contrast?
I think that President Trump's use of the word exonerated to describe himself is a bit the wording is a bit strong. I think that the Epstein files, the millions of files that have now been released under the Epstein Files Transparency Act that was approved by Congress late last year, I think that Donald Trump is mentioned extensively throughout the Epstein files, but there is no hard evidence that he did anything wrong other than initially associating with Jeffrey Epstein. But then once he discovered what Jeffrey Epstein was about, that he was a sex trafficker and, a bad actor, he distanced himself. And it's pretty clear from the Epstein files that Jeffrey Epstein hated. He really did not like President Trump. They did not get along. So I think that, Donald Trump is mentioned many, many times in the Epstein files, and there's nothing pointing to his guilt with respect to any sex trafficking crimes or anything of the sort. I think that the passing of intelligence, this is a fairly new development, this allegation, and I'm not sure what to think of that. I really don't know that much about it. I know that I would agree with President Trump when he said that it is a sad day for the royal family that the former Prince Andrew has been arrested. He's apparently was released after half a day in custody, with the being questioned or whatever, being held by the British by police in the United Kingdom. This is the first time that a royal family member, to the best of my knowledge, has been arrested in England since Charles I, and that didn't work out very well for Charles I, who, as history shows, was regarded as a traitor by Oliver Cromwell, and Parliament sentenced him to death, and he had his head chopped off in the 1640s. So that didn't. This is the first time that anything like that has happened in England in almost 400 years, and it is a sad day. I think that that King Charles rightly is distancing himself from his younger brother, and he's saying, "Let the chips fall where they may," and let Andrew be dealt with by the courts like any other person would be. And this is because King Charles apparently believes that is the right thing to do. And also he's trying to protect the institution of the monarchy in the United Kingdom, because he knows that the kind of damage that Andrew's travails are causing for the institution of the monarchy and for the royal family itself. So it is definitely a sad day for Britain, but maybe something positive will come out of it if Andrew is in fact guilty of crimes and he is brought to justice. That would probably help to heal the wounds that have been caused by this affair in Britain.
Thank you very much, Matthew Vadum, for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a great pleasure, as always. We turn over to our next story once again, and US President Donald Trump at the first meeting of the Board of Peace in Washington announced that 9 nations have pledged $7 billion for Gaza reconstruction. Additionally, 5 countries have agreed to deploy troops to an international stabilization force for the Palestinian territory. Trump also confirmed that the US would contribute $10 billion to the initiative, although the specific use of the funds remains unclear. According to reports, this meeting highlights Trump's broader efforts to present himself as a peacemaker amid ongoing tensions in the Middle East. Let's listen in to what Trump had to say.
Achieving a Gaza that is properly governed throughout the whole area is going to be, so many countries that have really nothing to do with the Middle East, but they're maybe somewhat close by. They're all involved. They want to go in and fight. They tell me all the time, we'd like to send soldiers to fight if it's necessary. And I don't think it's going to be necessary. We have 2 countries that want to go in and do a number on Hamas. I said, I really don't think I hope it's not going to be necessary, because they made a promise, and they promised me I'd get rid of their weapons. Looks like they're going to be doing that, but we'll have to find out. But it's no longer a hotbed of radicalism and terror. And to end that, we have today, and I'm pleased to announce that Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, UAE, Morocco, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Uzbekistan, and Kuwait have all contributed more than $7 billion toward the relief package. That's great. Thank you, fellas. Thank you.
Dr. Asta Chadha joins us now. She is an Associate Professor of International Relations, joining us live from Ritsu Mikan University in Kyoto, Japan. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for joining us. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you. First of all, $7 billion pledged by 9 countries for Gaza reconstruction, and the US has pledged $10 billion here, although officials have not clarified exactly how the money will be used or where it will come from. Experts say that the entire reconstruction of Gaza, as over 80% of the enclave is destroyed, could cost around $70 billion. This means current pledges cover roughly about 10% of what is needed. How realistic is it that this project succeeds and it has longevity?
Absolutely. I mean, the plan on paper sounds promising. The fact that President Trump and all other nations that have pledged to be in one way or another engaged with the Board of Peace, they do seem to hold a common vision, which is to move Gaza from this erstwhile image of being a perpetual conflict zone into an economic zone that can see some peace finally after decades of war. However, I must point out that their vision is going to be incomplete without taking care of 3 major factors. 1, they need to set up infrastructure and industry. That would need a proper plan, with regard to reconstruction after these decades of conflict that has happened, ensuring that there is both industrial infrastructure available, there is transportation infrastructure available, there is ample necessities and amenities available for people to sustain an economy there. Two, what would happen with regard to the safety and security of people in that region? Do they have enough plans? I mean, is US $10 billion enough for not just the United States, but only 7 countries to come together and hold a vision to say that they would be willing to provide peace? Peace also has its own cost. That remains, pretty much in the dark. We don't know what their plans are to ensure peace. And number 3, this region cannot sustain any economic progress. It might pick up, let's say, some economic activity, but it would be unable to maintain that economic prosperity unless there are investors, and there is huge amount of investment. And that largely depends on, let's say, the current US administration is very interested in bringing peace to the Gaza coastline. What about successive administrations? Would that continuity be maintained? So, I mean, just by, as you asked me, I mean, is the Board of Peace possible, let's say, a plan? Yes, it is definitely an alternative plan, but one needs to then also look into what it is seeking to replace. And it seems to be seeking to bypass and replace traditional institutions, no matter how much of a failure they might have been, but at least they represented more countries than Board of Peace does at this point, and I'm talking about United Nations. So it seems very unlikely at this point, unless there is a proper plan that is laid out, unless there is more clarity on where this money is going, where this money is going to continue to come from. Because remember, sustaining peace in a long-standing conflict zone requires constant flow of funding and constant, let's say, commitment to the region. And how is that going to be maintained by the Board of Peace is a little bit in the dark at the moment.
Indeed. Dr. Chadha, stay with us once again as we turn over to a related development. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has issued a warning to Iran amid rising tensions in the region. He said Israel is prepared for any scenario, and if Iran attacks, they will face a response they can't even imagine. Netanyahu added that Israel is working closely with the United States to counter the Iranian threat. He also revealed that in a recent meeting with US President Donald Trump, he outlined Israel's position on any future talks with Iran. The warning comes as Israel and the US continue to prepare for a possible strike on the country. Let's take a listen in to what the Israeli Prime Minister had to say.
ובאשר לעזה, כוחותינו לופתים מכל עבר את הרצועה, אתם הייתם שם, אתם יודעים. בהתאם ליעדי המלחמה שקבענו, החמאס יפורק מנשקו ועזה תפורז. וסיכמנו עם ידידינו בארצות הברית, לא יהיה שיקום הרצועה לפני פירוז הרצועה. ובקרוב מאוד, החמאס יועמד בפני דילמה, להתפרק מנשקו בדרך הקלה, או להתפרק מנשקו בדרך הקשה. אבל הנה דבר נוסף שאני מבטיח לכם, הוא יפורק מנשקו, ועזה לא תאיים עוד על ישראל.
Dr. Chadha joins us once again to discuss this. This comes after a meeting with Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, the 7th meeting which took place before the second round of negotiations, indirect negotiations between Tehran and Washington. But more talks are scheduled between the Iranians and the Americans in the coming weeks. We don't have a date yet, but it is coming. 10 to 15 days is what the United States has given Iran to make a deal to completely stop its nuclear enrichment. Israel's involvement here, they of course want military action inside Iran. It would be the beneficence of Israel if there was regime change in Tehran. Do you think Israel wants this wider escalation and it is ready for it? Of course, we saw a 12-day war. There was damage on both sides back in 2025 in June. Dr. Chadha, what do you make of Benjamin Netanyahu's statements there?
I agree with you. In terms of reading into Israel's strategy here with regard to security in the region. I mean, on the one hand, we need to understand that when Prime Minister Netanyahu speaks of supporting US maximum pressure and stating that Israel is prepared, he is in a way signaling that probably they are not aiming for immediate peace in the region. That's not even what they are expecting. On the other hand, the question is, can Israel act alone? What if US is not interested in a conflict anymore? I mean, can Israel be on its own and then protect its own sovereignty? I mean, looks like it. They have been perpetually engaged in one conflict or another, and it seems that they would, at least in the short run, be able to hold off, if there is a counterattack from Israel in response to US strikes. Israel seems to be in some way at least prepared for it, and the fact that they are showing this peak readiness in itself speaks that what direction they think this conflict is going to. It also in a way signals towards what they expect out of these talks, because I mean, again, if we read into the kind of talks, and you were previously mentioning those, there is a lot of mixed signals coming out of those. On one hand, we are hearing Iran's administration calling the talks as constructive. For instance, they're thinking that they could arrive at some sort of agreement based on general guiding principles. But remember, in this conflict, general guiding principles cannot assure peace. Specifically when US has the coercive power and US has the upper hand in terms of coercing Iran into some sort of a deal, making sure that they do not engage in nuclear enrichment or nuclear proliferation anymore. So it's not a very it's not an equal sort of a dialogue that's taking place. That's one. But I mean, again, is overall, when I look at it from a distance, overall, is this uncertainty good for the region? I mean, absolutely not. It just leaves not just the Middle East, but also the wider Indo-Pacific in a huge turmoil, because the more we hear of these talks failing, the more we hear about direct mediations, diplomacy failing, it really does paint a very bleak picture for peace in the Middle East and the wider Indo-Pacific. And then hearing about regional powers like Iran or Israel ready to face off each other in a conflict, and in some way holding talks, but also making sure that they are capable enough to engage in a conflict, whether it's a short-run conflict or a medium-term conflict, in itself is very discouraging. So I don't look at the current talks and the current pace at which the talks going as a very encouraging sign. Though I'm hopeful that they could develop into something more if the current US administration and the Iranian administration are interested in making sure that peace prevails over any conflict.
Dr. Chadha, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us. It's always a great pleasure to talk to you. We'll, of course, keep covering those escalations and statements coming out of the region as that situation unfolds. We move on to our next story now, and directly over to the United States. President Trump has directed US government agencies, including the Department of Defense, to begin the process of identifying and releasing files related to UFOs and extraterrestrial life. This announcement follows growing public interest in the United States and also a recent statement from former President Barack Obama, who discussed the possibility of aliens during a recent podcast appearance. But Obama has clarified that he himself has not seen any evidence of extraterrestrial contact yet. Meanwhile, President Trump has responded critically to Obama's remarks, accusing him of revealing classified information and claiming that Obama made a mistake by doing so. Despite numerous alleged UFO sightings, the Pentagon has previously stated that there is no evidence of alien life and that past panel hearings on unidentified aerial phenomena have not confirmed extraterrestrial encounters. Now we move on. A British couple, Lindsay and Craig Foreman, have been sentenced to 10 years in prison in Iran on espionage charges. Detained since January of 2025, the couple was arrested while travelling through the country on a motorcycle journey. Their son, Joe Bennett, expressed his deep sorrow, frustration and anger and disbelief over the decision. The couple denies the espionage charges, with their family raising concerns over the lack of evidence and transparency in the trial. The British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper condemned the ruling, calling it unjustifiable. Lindsay is held in Tehran's Evin prison, while Craig is in the political wing wing. Their family is calling for urgent action from the UK government to secure their release. Let's take a listen in.
When you first found out, as I say, it was sorrow, frustration, anger, disbelief. You know, there's a big array of emotions that came through, which were overwhelming, to be honest with you. In all honesty, for the last 14 months, it feels like we've been fighting a war on a couple of fronts, not only with the Iranians, but with our government to take action. Now that this has happened, I would like to see the action come to the forefront. With Yvette's Cooper, where she calls it appalling, unjustifiable, that's the first time in 14 months we've heard those kind of words be said publicly about my parents' case. So that has to give us some hope that now that the fact is they've been sentenced unlawfully, that the government will take a harsher stance. And I genuinely believe that there is room for them to do.
Now we move to some news from the tech world. Meta has reduced its annual distribution of stock options by about 5% for most of its staff, as the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, has ploughed billions of dollars into artificial intelligence goals. Meta and other big companies are competing to outbuild each other with massive data centers to get ahead in Silicon Valley's heated AI race. Meta has said that it expects the capital expenditure for 2026 to be between $115 billion to $135 billion. According to reports, Meta has slashed equity-based awards for the bulk of its employees for the second year in a row. Last month, Meta has laid off about 10% of its employees within its Reality Labs group, which had about 15,000 workers, as the company redirects resources from some of its annual reality products to wearables. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.